Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. It started with a simple notification. New match on Hinge. Just another Tuesday afternoon, killing time on the app while waiting for my microwave burrito to finish cooking. I wasn't expecting much, to be honest. Hinge had become a kind of background hum in my life, a low-stakes way to connect with people, mostly leading to awkward first dates and polite, but ultimately dead-end conversations. But this match felt different. His name was Alex, and his profile was intriguing. Not the standard gym selfies and group shots with blurry faces. Instead, there were photos of him hiking in the mountains, volunteering at an animal shelter, and one where he was genuinely beaming, holding a ridiculously oversized slice of pizza. His prompts were thoughtful and witty, revealing a guy who seemed both adventurous and down-to-earth. One response in particular caught my eye. "My greatest fear is not living a life worth remembering." Cheesy. Maybe. But it resonated with me. I'd been feeling stuck lately, trapped in a cycle of work, errands, and mindless scrolling. The idea of someone actively seeking a meaningful existence was appealing. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked about my passions, my dreams, my biggest regrets. He actually listened to my answers, responding with thoughtful questions and sharing his own experiences. It wasn't the usual superficial banter. It felt like we were genuinely connecting, building a foundation for something real. After a few days of intense texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course. Dating apps can be so deceptive. People curate their profiles to present the best possible version of themselves, and it's easy to get caught up in the fantasy. But when I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, I knew he was the real deal. He looked even better in person than in his photos, tall, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. We spent hours talking, lost in conversation, oblivious to the bustling cafe around us. We talked about everything, our families, our careers, our hopes for the future. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt easy. We went on a second date, and a third, and soon we were spending almost every weekend together. We hiked, we explored new restaurants, we even went to a cheesy karaoke night where he absolutely butchered Bohemian Rhapsody. In the best way possible. I was falling hard and fast. He seemed perfect, too good to be true. And that's when the cracks started to appear. It started subtly. A canceled date here, a missed phone call there. He became less responsive to my texts, his replies shorter and less frequent. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just busy. That work was stressful, but the feeling of unease gnawed at me. Then came the night he flaked on our plans to see a movie. He texted me an hour before, saying he had a family emergency and couldn't make it. I was disappointed, but I understood. Family comes first. But later that night, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a photo posted by a mutual friend. It was a group shot from a party, and there he was, Alex, laughing and holding a beer. No sign of a family emergency. My heart sank. I felt betrayed, foolish. I'd let myself get caught up in the fantasy, and now I was crashing back down to reality. I confronted him the next day, and he apologized profusely, claiming he'd made a mistake, that he'd panicked and didn't want to disappoint me. He swore it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the trust was broken. The rose-colored glasses had shattered, and I couldn't unsee the flaws. Over the next few weeks, the lies piled up. He told me he was working late when he was actually out with friends. He claimed he was visiting his sick grandmother when he was really on a weekend trip with another girl. I knew because I accidentally saw her tagged in one of his pictures. I was gathering clues like a detective. Each new lie felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to talk to him about it, to understand why he was doing this, but he just deflected, gaslighting me and making me feel like I was crazy. He'd say that I was too insecure. He would say he's a good person, but sometimes he makes mistakes. He said I read too much into things, that I was overreacting. He was chipping away at my self-worth, making me question my own sanity. The final straw came when I found a second Hinge profile on his phone. I wasn't snooping, I swear. He'd left his phone on the table while he went to the bathroom, and the notification popped up on the screen. New match. I couldn't resist. I picked up his phone and saw a completely separate Hinge account with different photos and a different bio. It was like he was living a double life. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my things, told him I was done, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I started getting strange messages on social media. Anonymous accounts sending me cryptic warnings, telling me to be careful, that Alex wasn't who he seemed. I dismissed them as trolls, jealous exes trying to stir up trouble. But then the messages became more specific, more personal. They knew details about my life that only Alex could have known. They knew where I worked, where I lived, who my friends were. I started to feel like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of a familiar figure in the crowd, a man who looked like Alex, but quickly disappeared. I'd get calls from unknown numbers, silent voices breathing on the other end of the line. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. They told me I was probably just being paranoid, that I should block the accounts and ignore the calls. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger, that Alex was somehow behind all of this, that he was stalking me, trying to control me. One night, I was walking home from work when I noticed someone following me. It was dark, and the streets were deserted. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned a corner and ducked into a doorway, hoping to lose them. But they were right behind me. A hand grabbed my arm, and I screamed. I turned around and saw him. It wasn't Alex. It was a woman, her face hidden beneath a hooded sweatshirt. She pulled me into the shadows and whispered in my ear, "He's not who you think he is. You need to be careful." Before I could ask her anything, she disappeared into the night. I was terrified. Who was this woman? What did she know about Alex? What was he really capable of? I decided to do some digging of my own. I started researching Alex online, scouring social media and public records. And that's when I found it. An old news article buried deep in the archives of a local newspaper. It was about a missing person case, a young woman who had disappeared several years ago. Her name was Sarah, and she was last seen dating a man named Alex. The article included a photo of Alex, and it was the same man I had been dating. But there was something different about his eyes. They were cold, empty, devoid of any emotion. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could it be possible? Was Alex a murderer? Had he killed Sarah? I contacted the police again, this time with the news article and the messages I had been receiving. They finally took me seriously, opening a new investigation into Sarah's disappearance. They questioned Alex, but he denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Sarah, that they had only gone on a few dates. He said he had no idea what happened to her. But the police didn't believe him. They searched his apartment and found evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance. They found a locket with her picture, hidden in a box under his bed. They found a journal filled with disturbing fantasies about controlling and manipulating women. Alex was arrested and charged with Sarah's murder. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. I was relieved, of course, but the experience had changed me. I was no longer the naive, trusting girl I had been before. I had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of online dating, about the importance of trusting your instincts. I still use Hinge occasionally, but I'm much more cautious now. I do my research, I ask the right questions, and I listen to my gut. And if anything feels off, I run the other way. The experience gave me anxiety, paranoia, and trust issues. I had a string of short-term relationships where I feared everything. In the end, I've come to the conclusion that I'm safer alone, and it's Alex's fault. What started as a normal day on Hinge had turned into the scariest moment of my life. It taught me an important lesson, that people online are not always who they say they are. The biggest plot twist of all is that Alex was not just a liar or a manipulator, but a dangerous predator capable of unspeakable acts. I am not sure that online dating is worth it. It started with a simple notification, new match on Hinge. Just another Tuesday afternoon, killing time on the app while waiting for my microwave burrito to finish cooking. I wasn't expecting much, to be honest. Hinge had become a kind of background hum in my life, a low-stakes way to connect with people, mostly leading to awkward first dates and polite, but ultimately dead-end conversations. But this match felt different. His name was Alex, and his profile was intriguing. Not the standard gym selfies and group shots with blurry faces. Instead, there were photos of him hiking in the mountains, volunteering at an animal shelter, and one where he was genuinely beaming, holding a ridiculously oversized slice of pizza. His prompts were thoughtful and witty, revealing a guy who seemed both adventurous and down-to-earth. One response, in particular, caught my eye. "My greatest fear is not living a life worth remembering." Cheesy. Maybe. But it resonated with me. I'd been feeling stuck lately, trapped in a cycle of work, errands, and mindless scrolling. The idea of someone actively seeking a meaningful existence was appealing. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He asked about my passions, my dreams, my biggest regrets. He actually listened to my answers, responding with thoughtful questions and sharing his own experiences. It wasn't the usual superficial banter. It felt like we were genuinely connecting, building a foundation for something real. After a few days of intense texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course. Dating apps can be so deceptive. People curate their profiles to present the best possible version of themselves, and it's easy to get caught up in the fantasy. But when I saw him waiting outside the coffee shop, I knew he was the real deal. He looked even better in person than in his photos, tall, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. We spent hours talking, lost in conversation, oblivious to the bustling cafe around us. We talked about everything: our families, our careers, our hopes for the future. He was intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt easy. We went on a second date, and a third, and soon we were spending almost every weekend together. We hiked, we explored new restaurants, we even went to a cheesy karaoke night where he absolutely butchered Bohemian Rhapsody, in the best way possible. I was falling hard and fast. He seemed perfect, too good to be true. And that's when the cracks started to appear. It started subtly. A canceled date here, a missed phone call there. He became less responsive to my texts, his replies shorter and less frequent. I tried to brush it off, telling myself he was just busy. That work was stressful, but the feeling of unease gnawed at me. Then came the night he flaked on our plans to see a movie. He texted me an hour before, saying he had a family emergency and couldn't make it. I was disappointed, but I understood. Family comes first. But later that night, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a photo posted by a mutual friend. It was a group shot from a party, and there he was, Alex, laughing and holding a beer. No sign of a family emergency. My heart sank. I felt betrayed, foolish. I'd let myself get caught up in the fantasy, and now I was crashing back down to reality. I confronted him the next day, and he apologized profusely, claiming he'd made a mistake, that he'd panicked and didn't want to disappoint me. He swore it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But the trust was broken. The rose-colored glasses had shattered, and I couldn't unsee the flaws. Over the next few weeks, the lies piled up. He told me he was working late when he was actually out with friends. He claimed he was visiting his sick grandmother when he was really on a weekend trip with another girl. I knew because I accidentally saw her tagged in one of his pictures. I was gathering clues like a detective. Each new lie felt like a punch to the gut. I tried to talk to him about it, to understand why he was doing this, but he just deflected, gaslighting me and making me feel like I was crazy. He'd say that I was too insecure. He would say he's a good person, but sometimes he makes mistakes. He said I read too much into things, that I was overreacting. He was chipping away at my self-worth, making me question my own sanity. The final straw came when I found a second Hinge profile on his phone. I wasn't snooping, I swear. He'd left his phone on the table while he went to the bathroom, and the notification popped up on the screen. New match. I couldn't resist. I picked up his phone and saw a completely separate Hinge account, with different photos and a different bio. It was like he was living a double life. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my things, told him I was done, and walked out the door. I didn't look back. But the story doesn't end there. A few weeks later, I started getting strange messages on social media. Anonymous accounts sending me cryptic warnings, telling me to be careful, that Alex wasn't who he seemed. I dismissed them as trolls, jealous exes trying to stir up trouble. But then the messages became more specific, more personal. They knew details about my life that only Alex could have known. They knew where I worked, where I lived, who my friends were. I started to feel like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of a familiar figure in the crowd, a man who looked like Alex, but quickly disappeared. I'd get calls from unknown numbers, silent voices breathing on the other end of the line. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without concrete evidence. They told me I was probably just being paranoid, that I should block the accounts and ignore the calls. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger, that Alex was somehow behind all of this, that he was stalking me, trying to control me. One night, I was walking home from work when I noticed someone following me. It was dark, and the streets were deserted. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned a corner and ducked into a doorway, hoping to lose them. But they were right behind me. A hand grabbed my arm, and I screamed. I turned around and saw him. It wasn't Alex. It was a woman, her face hidden beneath a hooded sweatshirt. She pulled me into the shadows and whispered in my ear, "He's not who you think he is. You need to be careful." Before I could ask her anything, she disappeared into the night. I was terrified. Who was this woman? What did she know about Alex? What was he really capable of? I decided to do some digging of my own. I started researching Alex online, scouring social media and public records. And that's when I found it. An old news article buried deep in the archives of a local newspaper. It was about a missing person case, a young woman who had disappeared several years ago. Her name was Sarah, and she was last seen dating a man named Alex. The article included a photo of Alex, and it was the same man I had been dating. But there was something different about his eyes. They were cold, empty, devoid of any emotion. I felt a chill run down my spine. Could it be possible? Was Alex a murderer? Had he killed Sarah? I contacted the police again, this time with the news article and the messages I had been receiving. They finally took me seriously, opening a new investigation into Sarah's disappearance. They questioned Alex, but he denied everything. He claimed he barely knew Sarah, that they had only gone on a few dates. He said he had no idea what happened to her. But the police didn't believe him. They searched his apartment and found evidence linking him to Sarah's disappearance. They found a locket with her picture, hidden in a box under his bed. They found a journal filled with disturbing fantasies about controlling and manipulating women. Alex was arrested and charged with Sarah's murder. Okay, so Hinge, right? The dating app that's designed to be deleted. Yeah, well, it should come with a warning label. May also delete your sanity. I never really bought into the whole online dating thing, but after my last relationship imploded in a spectacular dumpster fire of mutual resentment, my friends ganged up and forced me to download it. Just put yourself out there, they chirped, as if I hadn't been out there enough already, dealing with a toxic ex for 3 years. So fine. I swiped matched, engaged in the usual bland small talk about favorite travel destinations and quirky hobbies. It was all painfully performative. But then I matched with Liam. He wasn't conventionally attractive, not in that chiseled jaw, six-pack abs way that seems to dominate Hinge. He had a kind face, a slightly crooked smile, and eyes that looked like they'd seen a few things. His profile was refreshingly honest, too. He wrote about his struggles with anxiety, his love for obscure documentaries, and his terrible, but endearingly self-aware, attempts at cooking. Something about him felt real. We started chatting, and the conversations flowed effortlessly. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly insightful. He asked thoughtful questions, listened intently, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me beyond the surface level. We bonded over our shared love of vintage bookstores and our mutual disdain for overly curated Instagram feeds. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, of course. Dating apps always felt like a minefield of potential disappointments. But when I saw him waiting outside the cafe, that familiar nervousness melted away. He looked even kinder in person, and that crooked smile made my stomach do a little flip. The date was amazing. We talked for hours, laughing, sharing stories, and discovering all sorts of unexpected connections. It felt like I'd known him forever. We made plans to see each other again the following week, and I left the cafe with a giddy feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates, cozy dinners, long walks in the park, movie nights at his place. We were inseparable. He was everything I thought I wanted, attentive, supportive, and genuinely interested in building a real connection. He even seemed to understand my anxieties and insecurities, offering a comforting presence whenever I felt overwhelmed. It felt too good to be true, I know. And of course it was. The first red flag was subtle, almost unnoticeable. He started asking about my past relationships, probing for details about my exes. At first, I didn't think much of it. It's normal to be curious about someone's history, right? But his questions became increasingly specific, bordering on obsessive. He wanted to know everything. The details of our arguments, the reasons for our breakup, even the intimate details of our sex life. I tried to deflect, to change the subject, but he always circled back, relentlessly pursuing the information he craved. Then came the social media stalking. I discovered he was following all my exes on Instagram, liking their posts, even sending them private messages. When I confronted him about it, he became defensive, accusing me of being insecure and controlling. He claimed he was just curious, that he wanted to understand me better. But it felt like something darker, something more sinister. He started mirroring my behavior too. If I mentioned a book I loved, he'd suddenly be reading it. If I expressed an interest in a particular artist, he'd become an instant expert. It was like he was trying to morph into my ideal partner, anticipating my every need and desire. It was flattering at first, but then it became unsettling. It felt like I was dating a reflection, not a real person. Then the gaslighting began. He'd deny things he'd said or done, twist my words, make me question my own sanity. He'd tell me I was overreacting, that I was being too sensitive, that I was imagining things. Slowly, subtly, he eroded my confidence, making me doubt my own perceptions. He started isolating me from my friends and family, too. He'd make excuses for why I couldn't see them, creating conflicts and dramas that kept me constantly on edge. He'd tell me they didn't understand our relationship, that they were jealous of our happiness. I wanted to believe him, to trust him, but deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. I started experiencing panic attacks, waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart racing. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't focus. I was a shell of my former self. The final straw came during a weekend getaway to a remote cabin in the woods. It was supposed to be romantic, a chance for us to reconnect and escape the pressures of daily life. But it turned into a nightmare. He became increasingly paranoid, accusing me of cheating on him, of plotting to leave him. He confiscated my phone, preventing me from contacting anyone. He trapped me in the cabin, subjecting me to hours of emotional abuse. I was terrified. I genuinely believed he was going to hurt me. One morning, I woke up to find him standing over me, watching me sleep. His eyes were vacant, his expression unreadable. He didn't say a word, just stared at me with that chilling intensity. I knew I had to get out. I waited for him to fall asleep, then quietly packed my belongings and slipped out of the cabin. I ran through the woods, stumbling and falling, desperate to escape. I eventually found my way to a nearby town and flagged down a passing car. The driver, a kind elderly woman, took me to the nearest police station. I reported what had happened, but the police were skeptical. They said there was no evidence of abuse, no physical injuries. They told me I was probably just overreacting, that it was just a relationship gone sour. I felt defeated, humiliated, and utterly alone. I broke things off with Liam, changed my number, and blocked him on all social media. I thought it was over, but it wasn't. A few weeks later, I started receiving anonymous emails, filled with details about my life that only Liam could have known. The emails were unsettling, but not overtly threatening. They were more like reminders, subtle hints that he was still watching me. Then, I started seeing him. Not in person, but in my periphery vision. A fleeting glimpse of his silhouette in a crowd. A car that looked just like his driving past my apartment. I couldn't be sure it was him, but the feeling of being watched was constant, suffocating. I became obsessed with security, installing extra locks on my doors, buying a security system, and carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. I was living in a constant state of anxiety, terrified of what he might do next. One night, I came home to find my apartment ransacked. Nothing was stolen, but everything was disturbed, as if someone had been searching for something. I found a single white rose lying on my bed, its petals bruised and torn. That was the last straw. I packed my bags and moved across the country, leaving everything behind. I changed my name, got a new job, and tried to start over. But the trauma still lingers. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his vacant eyes and his chilling smile. I still flinch whenever I see someone who looks like him. I still struggle to trust people, to open myself up to new relationships. Hinge was supposed to help me find love. Instead, it led me to a nightmare I can't seem to escape. I deleted the app long ago, but the scars remain. And the worst part is, I know he's still out there, somewhere, preying on other unsuspecting women, weaving his web of manipulation and control. And I can't do anything to stop him. I'm about to tell you something I've never told anyone, not even my closest friends. It's a Hinge story, but not the funny, awkward kind. This is the kind that makes my stomach churn just thinking about it, even years later. I'm a pretty private person normally, but I feel like getting it out there might. I don't know, maybe lessen the weight of it all. It happened about 5 years ago, maybe 6. I was living in Chicago, fresh out of a messy breakup, and feeling like I needed a serious distraction. Hinge seemed like the perfect solution. It was supposed to be the relationship app, less about hookups than Tinder, and I was kind of hoping to find someone to just connect with, you know? Not necessarily marriage material, but someone to go to museums with and grab coffee with on Sunday mornings. I set up my profile, put up some decent pictures, mostly taken by friends, because I'm terrible at selfies, and wrote a bio that was witty, but not trying too hard. I even answered the prompts honestly, which is rare for me. I was actually trying to be myself, for once. That's how I matched with Daniel. His profile was intriguing. He was a writer, which immediately caught my attention. He had this brooding, intellectual vibe in his pictures. Lots of black and white photos, shots of him in bookstores. One of him staring intensely at a cup of coffee. He was definitely going for the tortured artist look, and honestly, it kind of worked. His prompts were even more interesting. He wrote about his love for obscure films, his fascination with philosophy, and his belief that everyone has a hidden darkness inside them. Okay, a little intense, maybe, but I was drawn to it. I was bored with the guys who just talked about sports and beer. We started chatting, and the conversations were amazing. He was articulate, funny, and incredibly insightful. We talked about everything: books, movies, politics, our deepest fears. He actually listened to me, really listened, and made me feel like my thoughts and opinions mattered. It was intoxicating. We messaged each other for a couple of weeks before deciding to meet up. He suggested this small, dimly lit bar in Wicker Park. Perfect, I thought. Artsy, low-key. Exactly the kind of place I liked. The night we met, he was even more captivating in person. He had this intense gaze that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. He dressed in all black, which I found ridiculously attractive at the time. We talked for hours, lost in our own little world. I felt this incredible connection with him, like I had known him my whole life. We started seeing each other regularly. Dates turned into late-night talks, which turned into sleeping over at his apartment. His place was exactly what you'd expect, cluttered, filled with books, with a typewriter sitting on his desk. It felt right. He was so different from anyone I had ever dated. He challenged me intellectually, made me think about things in new ways. He was passionate, intense, and completely obsessed with me. Looking back, that should have been a red flag, but I was too caught up in the whirlwind to notice. Things moved fast. Too fast, probably. Within a few months, we were practically living together. I started spending all my time at his apartment, neglecting my friends and my own interests. I was completely consumed by him. Then things started to change. He became more possessive, more controlling. He started questioning me about where I was going, who I was talking to. He didn't like me spending time with my friends, especially the male ones. He accused me of flirting with other guys, even when I wasn't. He started picking fights over the smallest things, then would apologize profusely afterward, showering me with affection and promising to change. It was a cycle of love and abuse, and I was trapped in it. His fascination with darkness intensified. He started talking about his dark side, how he couldn't control his impulses. He would tell me stories about his past, about things he had done that he wasn't proud of. He hinted at violence, at anger that he couldn't contain. He never physically hurt me, but the threats were always there, unspoken. He knew how to manipulate me, how to make me feel guilty, how to make me believe that I was the one who was causing his pain. I started to become isolated, afraid to leave his apartment. I felt like I was walking on eggshells all the time, terrified of setting him off. I lost my spark, my sense of self. I was just a shell of the person I used to be. One night, we were arguing about something stupid. I don't even remember what. He was yelling, pacing back and forth, his eyes blazing with anger. I was terrified, cowering in the corner of the room. He stopped suddenly, his face contorted with rage. He looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. "You think you're so much better than me," he spat. "You think you're so perfect. But you're just like all the others. You're a liar, a cheat, a whore." He lunged at me, grabbing my arm and squeezing it so hard that I cried out in pain. He pushed me against the wall, his face inches from mine. "I should kill you," he whispered. "I should just end it all right now." I was frozen with fear, unable to move, unable to speak. I thought he was going to kill me. I really did. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. He released my arm, stepped back, and started sobbing. "I'm so sorry," he cried. "I didn't mean it. I would never hurt you. Please forgive me." He sank to his knees, begging for my forgiveness. I was still shaking, still terrified, but I felt a flicker of pity for him. He seemed so broken, so lost. That's when I realized I had to get out. I knew that if I stayed with him, he would eventually kill me. Maybe not intentionally, maybe not in a fit of rage, but he would destroy me, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. I waited until he fell asleep. Then I packed a small bag with my essentials. I crept out of the apartment, leaving everything else behind. I didn't even take my phone. I went to a friend's house, woke her up in the middle of the night, and told her everything. She was shocked, horrified. She helped me get a new phone, a new apartment, a new life. I never saw Daniel again. I blocked him on all social media, changed my number, and avoided all the places we used to go together. I was terrified that he would find me, but he never did. It took me a long time to recover from that experience. I went to therapy, talked to my friends, and slowly started to rebuild my life. I learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to recognize the red flags early on. I still have nightmares sometimes, vivid dreams where he's chasing me, his eyes filled with that same hatred, but they're becoming less frequent, less intense. I'm still on Hinge, actually. I know it sounds crazy, but I refuse to let one bad experience ruin dating for me. I've met some great guys, some really genuine, kind people, but I'm much more cautious now. I take things slow. I pay attention to the warning signs, and I trust my gut. And I never, ever talk about my dark side on the first date, or the second, or the 10th. I still haven't told anyone this story, not even my therapist. I just couldn't. It felt too raw, too personal, too shameful. But writing it all down, getting it out there, feels cleansing somehow. Maybe it'll help someone else who's in a similar situation. Maybe it'll make them realize that they're not alone, that they deserve better, and that they have the strength to get out. If you're reading this and you're in an abusive relationship, please get help. Talk to someone you trust. Call a hotline. Do whatever you need to do to get safe. You deserve to be loved, not controlled. You deserve to be happy, not afraid. And remember, you are not alone. I guess I should start by saying I'm not really a dating app person. Never have been. I've always been more of a meet someone in real life kind of gal. But after a particularly brutal breakup, and a whole lot of encouragement from my friends, I decided to give Hinge a try. They swore it was different, more relationship-oriented, less superficial. And honestly, I was lonely. So, I downloaded the app, meticulously crafted my profile, featuring only my best angles and witty prompts, of course, and started swiping. It was mostly the same old stuff. Guys with gym selfies, guys who were way too into hiking, guys who couldn't seem to spell correctly. But then I stumbled upon Liam's profile. He was different. His pictures weren't overly posed or filtered. One showed him reading in a park, another was a candid shot of him laughing with friends, and a third was a blurry picture of a cat perched on his head. His prompts were thoughtful and funny, revealing a genuine sense of humor and a surprisingly introspective side. He seemed normal, actually normal. We matched, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about books, movies, our families, our dreams. He wasn't pushy or overly flirty, just genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, but also cautiously optimistic. He seemed too good to be true, but I figured, what did I have to lose? The coffee date went perfectly. He was even more charming in person, witty and kind and genuinely engaging. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories like we'd known each other for years. There was an undeniable connection between us, a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. We made plans to see each other again, and again, and again. Soon, we were spending almost every weekend together. Hiking, going to museums, trying new restaurants. It felt like we were living a rom-com. He was everything I thought I wanted. Intelligent, funny, supportive, and genuinely caring. He even got along great with my friends, which was a huge plus. I was falling hard, and I wasn't ashamed to admit it. After a few months, we made things official. He became my boyfriend, my partner, my best friend. I introduced him to my family, and they loved him. Everything felt right. Too right, maybe. That should have been my first red flag. But when you are happy, who cares? Then things began to change. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He started becoming more distant, less communicative. He'd cancel plans at the last minute, claiming he was tired or had a lot of work to do. Our conversations became shorter, less meaningful. He seemed distracted, like his mind was always somewhere else. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to stress or a busy schedule. I wanted to believe everything was okay, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. One night, I was over at his apartment, waiting for him to finish up a work call so we could watch a movie. While he was on the phone, I decided to tidy up a bit. I started with his bookshelf, straightening the books and dusting the shelves. As I was reaching for a book on the top shelf, I noticed something tucked away in the corner, a small, wooden box. Curiosity piqued. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside, there was a collection of old photographs. Black and white, faded and disturbing. They were pictures of women, all different, but all with the same vacant, lifeless eyes. Their faces were gaunt, their bodies emaciated. They looked dead. I slammed the box shut, my heart pounding in my chest. What were these pictures? Who were these women? I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a primal sense of dread that I couldn't explain. Liam walked back into the room. I froze, my hand still clutching the box. He saw the look on my face, and his expression changed. The warmth in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare that I had never seen before. "What's that?" he asked, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. I couldn't speak. I just held out the box, my hand shaking uncontrollably. He took the box from me, his eyes never leaving mine. He opened it, glanced at the photographs, and then looked back at me with a chillingly calm expression. "These are old friends," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They helped me find myself." His words sent a shiver down my spine. "Helped you? What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a darkness that seemed to consume everything around him. Then he smiled, a slow, sinister smile that twisted his features into something unrecognizable. "You wouldn't understand," he said. "You're not like them." He took a step closer to me, and I instinctively recoiled. "What are you talking about? What did you do to them?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic. He chuckled, a low, guttural sound that sent a wave of terror through my body. "I gave them what they wanted," he said. "I freed them from their pain. You killed them." I whispered, tears streaming down my face. He didn't deny it. He just kept smiling, his eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. "They were suffering," he said. "I just made it stop. I can do the same for you." I knew I had to get out of there. I turned to run, but he grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't go," he said, his voice now a low growl. "We're not finished yet." I struggled against him, kicking and screaming, but he wouldn't let go. He dragged me towards the bedroom, his grip tightening on my arm. I saw a flash of something metallic in his hand, a knife. I screamed, louder than I ever thought possible. Just then, the door to the apartment burst open. It was my friend, Sarah, and her boyfriend, Mark. I had texted her earlier, telling her I was feeling uneasy about Liam and asking her to check on me. They must have sensed something was wrong and rushed over. Mark tackled Liam, knocking him to the ground. Sarah grabbed me, pulling me away from him and out of the apartment. We ran, not stopping until we were safely inside Sarah's car. We sped away, leaving Liam behind. The police arrived quickly, and Liam was arrested. He was charged with multiple counts of murder, as well as attempted murder and kidnapping. The investigation revealed a horrifying truth. Liam had been preying on vulnerable women he met on dating apps for years. He would charm them, gain their trust, and then kill them. The photographs in the box were his trophies, mementos of his twisted crimes. I was lucky. I was one of the few who managed to escape, but the experience has left me scarred for life. I still have nightmares about Liam, about his cold eyes and sinister smile. I still jump at every shadow, every unexpected noise. I'm terrified of dating apps, of trusting anyone ever again. I tried going to therapy. I went to support groups, but the feelings of what could have happened is still heavy. The guilt of not seeing the red flags sooner eats away at me every single day. The what ifs. What if my friend did not come? What if I did not match with him? The idea that it started with a dating app. The idea that I almost lost my life. What haunts my dreams is not just the fear of what happened, but the knowledge that I was so easily fooled. I trusted him. I loved him. And he almost destroyed me. It's a betrayal that I don't know if I'll ever fully recover from. I am still having nightmares. I am now on anxiety medications and depression medication. Every night I pray he does not get out of jail, and every night I worry. Every night I have some kind of dream where I am back at his apartment. I see the box, the photos, his smile. Then I wake up sweating, shaking. He haunts me. It will never be the same. The app is deleted and I have lost hope in people. I will never go on another date again. Never. Okay, so this is my Hinge story. And honestly, even thinking about it now makes my skin crawl. It wasn't a quick, sharp shock of terror, more like a slow, insidious dread that seeped into my life and left a stain I can't seem to scrub out. I was in my late 20s, living in a new city, and feeling that familiar pang of loneliness that comes with trying to build a life from scratch. Hinge seemed like a decent option. Not as hookup-centric as Tinder, a bit more curated than Bumble. I filled out my profile with the usual carefully selected photos and witty prompts, hoping to attract someone normal. Someone who liked hiking and craft beer, maybe. Someone who wouldn't turn my life into a psychological thriller. I matched with him pretty quickly. His name was Liam, and his profile was fine. Not overly impressive, but not a red flag parade either. He had a decent job, liked dogs, and seemed to have a dry sense of humor. His photos were mostly of him outdoors, hiking and camping. He wasn't conventionally attractive, but he had a kind of rugged charm. We chatted for a week or so, and the conversations were easy. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking thoughtful questions about my interests and my reasons for moving to the city. We bonded over our shared love of obscure documentaries and our mutual disdain for small talk. We decided to meet for coffee. The date was okay. Not amazing, not terrible. He was a bit quieter in person than he had been online, but he was still engaging and polite. We talked for a couple of hours, and I left feeling neutral. I wasn't blown away, but I wasn't turned off either. I figured I'd give him another chance. We went out a few more times. A movie, a dinner, a walk in the park. With each date, I found myself liking him more and more. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly thoughtful. He remembered the small details I told him, like my favorite type of tea or my fear of heights. He seemed genuinely invested in making me happy. The problem was that he was also very awkward physically. There was something about how he moved, how he seemed scared to touch me, and how he couldn't maintain eye contact. It was almost off-putting, but I was willing to see past it. It was after about a month of dating that the weirdness started. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He started asking me a lot of questions about my past relationships. Not in a jealous or insecure way. More like he was conducting an investigation. He wanted to know everything. How they ended, what I liked about them, what I hated. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to him being a bit insecure and wanting to make sure he didn't repeat the mistakes of my exes. Then came the gifts. Small things at first. A book I had mentioned wanting to read. A rare tea he found at a specialty store. Sweet gestures, but they started to become excessive. He was constantly giving me things, showering me with attention and affection. It felt suffocating, like he was trying to buy my love. I started to feel like I was being watched. I would catch him staring at me, not in a loving way, but in an intense, almost unsettling way. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. One night, after a particularly intense dinner, he walked me home. When we got to my apartment, he lingered at the door, not wanting to say goodbye. He kept asking if he could come in, just for a little while. I told him I was tired and needed to get up early the next day. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't push it. The next morning, I woke up to find a small, wrapped gift on my doorstep. It was a framed photo of me sleeping in my bed. I didn't recognize the blanket in the picture, and I certainly didn't recognize the pillow. It was terrifying. It looked like someone had been in my apartment while I was asleep. I called the police, but they couldn't do much. They said there was no sign of forced entry, and that it was likely someone I knew. They took the photo as evidence, but I never heard back from them. I called Liam and told him what had happened. He acted shocked and concerned. He offered to come over and stay with me, but I declined. I didn't want him anywhere near me. I stopped answering his calls and texts. I blocked him on social media. I tried to erase him from my life, but he wouldn't let me. He started showing up at my work, waiting for me outside my office building. He would just stand there, staring at me, not saying a word. I was afraid, so I started taking different routes home, varying my schedule, trying to avoid him, but he always seemed to find me. One day, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. I cautiously opened the door and stepped inside. The apartment was empty, but there was a strange smell in the air, like something had been burning. I went into my bedroom and found Liam sitting on my bed, waiting for me. He smiled when he saw me. "I just wanted to talk," he said, his voice calm and even. I screamed. I ran out of the apartment and didn't stop running until I reached the nearest police station. I told them everything about the photo, the gifts, the stalking, the unlocked door. This time, they took me seriously. They went to my apartment and arrested Liam. They found a stash of photos and videos of me in his apartment, taken without my knowledge or consent. They also found a detailed journal, filled with his thoughts and fantasies about me. It was disturbing, to say the least. Liam was charged with stalking, harassment, and breaking and entering. He pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to several years in prison. I thought it was over. I was wrong. Even behind bars, he managed to find ways to contact me. He sent me letters, filled with apologies and promises of change. I threw them away, unread, but the fact that he was still trying to reach me was unsettling. I moved again, changed my name, and tried to start over, but the fear never really went away. I still have nightmares about him, about his eyes, about the feeling of being watched. I still check my locks multiple times before bed, and I always leave a light on. A few years passed, and I started to feel like I could finally breathe again. I even cautiously dipped my toe back into the dating pool. But then one day, I received a message on Hinge. It was from a new profile, no picture, no information, just a single sentence. "I'm waiting for you." My blood ran cold. I knew it was him. He was out of prison. I deleted Hinge immediately, but the damage was done. He was back in my head, and the fear was overwhelming. I contacted the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he actually contacted me again or threatened me. I felt helpless, vulnerable. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I hired a private investigator to track him down and find out what he was planning. The investigator discovered that he was living in a nearby town and had been working at a local grocery store right next to my own neighborhood. I knew I couldn't live in fear any longer. I had to confront him. I went to the grocery store and waited for him to get off work. When he came out, I approached him. He looked shocked to see me. "I told you I'd be waiting," he said, a sinister smile spreading across his face. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, letting him see the anger and determination in my eyes. "Leave me alone, Liam," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Leave me alone, or I will make sure you regret it." He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring at me. After a long, tense moment, he turned and walked away. I watched him go, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know if he'll ever truly leave me alone. I doubt it, but I refuse to let him control my life any longer. I refuse to live in fear. I've since hired a bodyguard and even taken self-defense classes, and I know the fear is still there. I still see him when I close my eyes, but I'm trying to be strong. I can only hope that one day, I will be free from him for good. This is a true story. Liam is a real person, and he still haunts my dreams. Dating apps can be dangerous, and you never really know who's behind the profile. Be careful who you match with. Always trust your gut, and never, ever ignore the red flags. The warning signs are almost always there, but it's often too late. This Hinge story has left me permanently scarred. I'll never look at online dating the same way again. He stole so many years from my life, but he won't steal more. I never felt unsafe on Hinge until that moment when I realized he knew where my parents lived. Hinge. It was supposed to be the dating app for people who want to get off dating apps. Less swiping, more curated profiles, a focus on conversation starters, all that jazz. I'd had my fair share of dating app experiences, the good, the bad, and the utterly forgettable. Hinge felt different, more mature somehow. Or at least, that's what I told myself as I meticulously crafted my profile, choosing the photos that made me look fun, interesting, and, crucially, not desperate. It worked. I matched with a lot of guys, had some decent conversations, even went on a few dates. None of them really clicked, but that was dating in your late 20s, right? A constant stream of near misses and almost but not quites. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was impressive. He had that successful but approachable vibe. Photos of him hiking in the mountains, volunteering at an animal shelter, and laughing with friends at some outdoor cafe. His prompts were witty and insightful. He seemed genuinely kind, intelligent, and adventurous. Everything I thought I was looking for. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He asked thoughtful questions, listened attentively, and shared his own experiences with vulnerability and humor. We talked about our careers, our hobbies, our families, our dreams for the future. It felt real. After a week of nonstop texting, we decided to meet for coffee. He suggested a place near my office, which I appreciated. It showed he was considerate of my time and schedule. The date was even better than I expected. Liam was even more charming in person. He was handsome, yes, but it was his genuine warmth and attentiveness that really drew me in. We talked for hours, laughing, sharing stories, and discovering surprising common interests. By the end of the date, I felt like I'd known him for years. We went on several more dates over the next few weeks. We explored local museums, went for hikes in the park, and cooked dinner together at my apartment. He was always a perfect gentleman, respectful, and considerate. He even remembered small details about things I'd mentioned in passing, like my favorite type of tea or the name of my childhood pet. I was falling hard. He met my friends, and they loved him. My parents, whom I hadn't introduced to a boyfriend in years, were cautiously optimistic. Liam seemed too good to be true, but I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I'd finally found the one. Then, things started to get weird. It started small. He'd show up at my apartment with groceries, even though I hadn't asked him to. He'd leave little notes on my car, telling me to have a good day. He'd send me articles or podcasts that he thought I'd find interesting, even if they were on obscure topics we'd only briefly discussed. At first, I thought it was sweet, a sign of his affection and attention to detail. But then it started to feel intrusive, like he was trying to anticipate my needs before I even knew them myself. He started asking more questions about my family. Not just the usual, polite inquiries about their health and well-being, but more specific questions about their jobs, their hobbies, their daily routines. He seemed particularly interested in my parents' house, where it was located, what it looked like, how long they'd lived there. I brushed it off as innocent curiosity, but a small seed of unease began to sprout in my mind. One evening, we were having dinner at my apartment. I was telling him about a stressful day at work, and he listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "You know, I was driving around your parents' neighborhood the other day. It's such a nice area, very quiet and peaceful." My blood ran cold. "What?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a disarmingly charming smile. "Just admiring the scenery. I like to explore new places." "But why were you near my parents' house?" He shrugged. "I told you. I was just driving around. It's not a big deal." But it was a big deal. My parents lived in a small, secluded town about an hour away from the city. There was no reason for him to be just driving around their neighborhood. "You didn't tell me you were going to visit my parents," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't visit them," he said, his smile fading slightly. "I just drove by their house. I wanted to see where you grew up." "That's creepy, Liam." He looked genuinely hurt. "I didn't mean to creep you out. I just care about you, and I wanted to learn more about your life." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to believe him, but something felt terribly wrong. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and confusion. I tried to rationalize his behavior, to convince myself that I was overreacting. But the image of him driving around my parents' neighborhood, knowing where they lived, kept replaying in my mind. I started to avoid him. I made excuses to cancel our dates, ignored his texts and calls. I needed time to process everything, to figure out what was going on. He didn't take it well. He became more persistent, more demanding. He'd show up at my office unannounced, send me dozens of messages a day, even leave voicemails begging me to talk to him. His behavior was escalating, and I was starting to feel genuinely afraid. One night, I was walking home from work when I noticed a figure lurking in the shadows across the street. It was him. He was standing there, watching me, his face obscured by the darkness. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel his eyes on me, following my every move. I reached my apartment building and fumbled with my keys, desperate to get inside. As I unlocked the door, I heard footsteps behind me. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and menacing. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands trembling. I peeked through the peephole and saw him standing there, his face contorted with anger and frustration. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, clutching my phone, listening for any sign of him. Every creak of the building, every rustle of leaves outside my window sent shivers down my spine. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything about his increasingly obsessive behavior, his questions about my family, his presence in my parents' neighborhood. They took my statement, but they said there wasn't much they could do unless he actually threatened me or harmed me. I felt helpless and vulnerable. I knew I had to do something to protect myself and my family. I decided to go to my parents' house. I needed to warn them about Liam, to make sure they were safe. The drive was agonizing. Every mile felt like an eternity. I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, paranoid that he was following me. When I finally arrived at my parents' house, I burst through the door, breathless and frantic. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." My parents were startled by my sudden arrival. They ushered me inside, their faces etched with concern. I told them everything about Liam, about his strange behavior, about my fears for their safety. They listened patiently, their expressions growing increasingly grave. When I finished, my father stood up and walked to the window, peering out into the street. "He's here, isn't he?" he said, his voice grim. I rushed to the window and looked out, and there he was. Liam was standing across the street, watching our house, a chilling smile on his face. But that wasn't the worst part. As I looked closer, I noticed something else. He wasn't just standing there. He was holding something in his hand. It was a photograph of my parents, standing on their front porch. A photograph that could only have been taken recently. That's when I realized the full extent of his obsession. Okay, buckle up, because this Hinge story still makes my skin crawl. I thought I was pretty good at spotting red flags, but Liam was a masterclass in subtle creepiness disguised as genuine interest. I'd been on Hinge for a while, mostly striking out with guys who were either aggressively boring or clearly just looking for a hookup. Liam was different, or at least, he seemed to be. His profile was actually thoughtful. He had witty prompts, decent photos, nothing model-esque, but normal and relatable, and his bio suggested he was looking for something real. We matched, and our initial conversations were surprisingly engaging. He was a writer, which I found intriguing, and he had this way of really listening and asking follow-up questions that made me feel seen. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our childhoods to our anxieties about the future. It was refreshing, especially compared to the usual Hinge banter. After a week or so of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated for a second, but then I thought, why not? He seemed genuine, and I was tired of just swiping and ghosting. We agreed to meet at a cafe near my apartment on a Saturday morning. I even told my roommate about it, just in case. The coffee date started off well. He was even more charming in person, with a disarming smile and kind eyes. We talked for hours, losing track of time as we discussed our passions, our dreams, and our fears. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself opening up more than I usually do on first dates. There weren't any glaring red flags. No weird comments, no awkward silences, no pressure to do anything I wasn't comfortable with. He even walked me back to my apartment afterward and gave me a polite hug. "I had a really great time," he said, his eyes sparkling. "I'd love to see you again." I smiled. "Me too," I replied. We made plans for a second date the following week, a hike in a nearby state park. I was actually excited. Maybe, just maybe, I had finally found someone decent on Hinge. That's when things started to unravel. The first sign was the intensity of his texting. After our coffee date, he started texting me constantly, throughout the day and late into the night. At first, I didn't mind it. It was nice to feel wanted and appreciated. But then it became overwhelming. He would text me the moment I woke up, asking about my dreams. He would text me during the day, checking in on what I was doing every hour. He would text me late at night, sharing his deepest thoughts and feelings. It was like he needed constant validation and reassurance. I tried to gently pull back, to create some space for myself. I started responding less frequently, or with shorter messages. But he would notice immediately, and he would become anxious and clingy. "Are you mad at me?" he would text. "Did I do something wrong?" "I'm just really busy," I would reply, trying to be diplomatic. But it never worked. He would keep pressing until I gave him the reassurance he needed. The second red flag was his knowledge of my routines. He started mentioning things that I hadn't told him, things that he couldn't have known unless he was actively watching me. For example, one day he texted me, "I saw you walking to the gym this morning. You looked really cute in your workout clothes." I hadn't told him that I went to the gym on Saturday mornings, or what I wore. He must have seen me from somewhere, but it still gave me the creeps. Another time, he texted me, "I know you like to get coffee at that little cafe on Elm Street. Maybe I'll see you there sometime." I hadn't mentioned that cafe to him either. It was like he was building a profile of my life, piecing together information from my social media and my daily routines. The final straw was the hike. We met at the trailhead, and he seemed normal at first. But as we hiked deeper into the woods, his behavior started to change. He became more intense, more focused on me. He kept staring at me with this unsettling intensity, like he was trying to see into my soul. He started asking me personal questions, probing into my past relationships and my deepest insecurities. I felt increasingly uncomfortable, but I didn't want to make a scene. As we reached a secluded clearing, he stopped walking and turned to face me. "I have something to tell you," he said, his voice low and serious. "I think I'm falling in love with you." I didn't know what to say. We had only been on 2 dates, and I definitely wasn't feeling the same way. "Liam, I started to say, but he cut me off. "I know you feel it too," he said, stepping closer to me. "I can see it in your eyes." I took a step back, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. "Liam, this is moving too fast," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't think we're a good match." His expression changed. His eyes hardened, and his smile disappeared. "You don't mean that," he said, his voice now cold and menacing. "I know you want me. You're just scared." I was terrified. I turned to run, but he grabbed my arm. "Let go of me," I yelled, trying to pull away. He held on tight, his grip tightening around my wrist. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his voice now a low growl. "You're mine." I started screaming, hoping that someone would hear me. But we were deep in the woods, far from the trailhead. No one was around. He dragged me deeper into the clearing, towards a thick patch of trees. I fought back with all my might, kicking and scratching and screaming. But he was stronger than me, and he wouldn't let go. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I saw a group of hikers approaching the clearing. I screamed even louder, hoping they would hear me. Liam froze, his eyes widening in fear. He released my arm and stepped back, blending into the trees. The hikers rushed towards me, asking if I was okay. I was shaking and crying, but I managed to tell them what had happened. They called the police, and Liam was eventually arrested. It turned out that he had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been using Hinge to find victims, preying on women who were looking for genuine connections. The police found a notebook in his apartment filled with information about me, including my address, my phone number, my daily routines, and even my social security number. It was terrifying. After the incident, I deleted Hinge and all my other dating apps. I changed my phone number, increased my security at my apartment, and started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. I was traumatized. It took me a long time to feel safe again. Even now, years later, I still get anxious when I think about Liam. I still worry that he might be out there, watching me, waiting for another opportunity. The experience taught me a valuable lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts. It also taught me that even the most charming and seemingly genuine people can be hiding a dark secret. Now I always thoroughly research the person before I meet them in person. It's sad that I had to learn the hard way, but I'm grateful to be alive. Hinge may have helped me connect with a terrible person. Okay, so Hinge. Right, the app that's designed to be deleted. Bullshit. At least, that's what I thought after my experience. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and my friends were all pushing me to get back out there. I wasn't ready, not even close, but the loneliness was starting to creep in. So fine, I downloaded Hinge, made a profile, put up some decent pictures, thank you, filters, answered the prompts with witty-ish responses, and started swiping. Or liking. Whatever. It was the usual dating app circus. Lots of boring conversations, a few awkward meetups, and a whole lot of ghosting. Then I matched with Liam. His profile was different. He wasn't conventionally attractive, not in the typical Instagram model way. He had this intense gaze in his photos, like he was staring directly into your soul. He wasn't smiling in any of them, but it wasn't an angry look, more like curiosity. His prompts were thoughtful, a little dark, but intriguing. One of them was, "The most spontaneous thing I've done is watch the sun rise from a place you wouldn't expect." Another was, "I'm looking for someone who understands the beauty in decay." I know, red flags galore. But I was bored, and honestly, a little drawn to the weirdness. So I sent him a like with a comment on his beauty in decay prompt. He responded almost immediately, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about art, music, philosophy, stuff I actually cared about. Not just the usual, "What do you do?" Small talk. We messaged back and forth for a few days, and he asked me out. I hesitated. Something about him still felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. He suggested a walk through a local park that had a reputation for being a little spooky. It was known for its overgrown trails and abandoned structures. Perfect, right? I said yes. The day of the date, I almost canceled. I had this overwhelming feeling of dread, like something bad was going to happen. But I'm stubborn, and I didn't want to be a flake. Plus, a part of me was still curious. So I went. He was waiting for me at the park entrance, wearing a long black coat and a scarf that covered most of his face. It was a warm day, so the coat seemed a little out of place. He greeted me with a nod, and we started walking. The park was even more deserted than I expected. The trails were narrow and overgrown, and the silence was almost deafening. Liam didn't say much, but he kept glancing at me with that intense gaze of his. It was unnerving. As we walked deeper into the park, the atmosphere grew heavier. The trees seemed to lean in, and the air felt colder. I started to get that prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like I was being watched. Liam stopped in front of an old, crumbling building. It looked like it used to be some kind of pavilion, but now it was covered in graffiti and partially collapsed. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "The place you wouldn't expect." He led me inside, and the darkness was almost suffocating. The only light came from a few cracks in the roof. The air smelled damp and musty. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, silver object. It was a knife. I froze. My heart was pounding in my chest. "What are you doing?" I managed to stammer. He smiled, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I wanted to show you something beautiful," he said. "Something real." He took a step closer, and I backed away, my hand reaching for my phone and my purse. But he was too fast. He grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't," he said, his voice hardening. "I just want you to see." He raised the knife and ran it along the wall, carving a symbol into the crumbling plaster. It was a strange symbol, one I'd never seen before. It looked ancient, almost like something from a forgotten language. As he carved, he started to chant in a low, guttural voice. I couldn't understand the words, but they sent shivers down my spine. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to deepen. I struggled to break free, but his grip was too tight. I was trapped, alone in the dark with this man, who was clearly insane. Then, the ground started to shake. Not a violent earthquake, but a subtle tremor that vibrated through my bones. The crumbling building groaned, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Liam stopped chanting and looked up, his eyes wide with excitement. "It's working," he whispered. "It's finally working." Suddenly, a crack appeared in the wall behind him. It started small, but it quickly grew wider, spreading across the wall like a spiderweb. A strange, ethereal light emanated from the crack. I stared in horror as the crack widened further, revealing a dark, swirling vortex. It looked like a tear in reality, a gateway to some other dimension. Liam released my wrist and stepped towards the vortex, his face illuminated by the otherworldly light. "Come with me," he said, his voice filled with a strange urgency. "Let me show you what's beyond." I didn't know what was happening, but I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, stumbling through the darkness. I didn't look back. I ran until I reached the park entrance, my lungs burning and my legs aching. I didn't stop running until I was safely back in my car, the doors locked and the engine running. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They took my statement, but they seemed skeptical. They searched the park, but they found nothing. No Liam, no crumbling building, no strange vortex. It was like it had all been a hallucination. They chalked it up to a panic attack, suggested I see a therapist. But I knew what I saw. I knew what happened. I deleted Hinge that night, and I haven't been on a dating app since. I changed my number, moved to a new apartment, and tried to put the whole thing behind me. But I couldn't forget Liam's face, his intense gaze, the chilling chanting, the dark vortex. It haunted my dreams. And then, a few weeks later, I saw it. I was scrolling through a local history website, researching something for work, when I stumbled upon an article about the park. It talked about the park's history, its abandoned structures, and the strange legends that surrounded it. And then I saw it. A picture of the crumbling building, the one Liam had taken me to. But in the picture, the building wasn't crumbling. It was intact, beautiful, and different. The article explained that the building had been destroyed in a fire over 100 years ago. Beneath the picture was a caption, "The pavilion before the ritual." That's when it hit me. The chilling realization that sent a cold shiver down my spine. The building wasn't supposed to be there. It had been destroyed long ago. Liam hadn't just taken me to a random abandoned building. He had somehow brought it back. He wasn't just some weirdo with a knife. He was something else entirely. He was trying to open a gateway to another dimension, and he had used me to do it. The scariest part wasn't the knife, the chanting, or the vortex. The scariest part was realizing that he wasn't some random guy I met on Hinge. He had chosen me. He had sought me out. He knew something about me, something that made me the perfect candidate for his twisted ritual. The scariest part was knowing that I was targeted. He had known what I was vulnerable to and used it against me. That somewhere in my profile or the words I had used showed him what kind of person I was. I still don't know why he chose me, what he saw in me that made me so special. And I don't want to know. I just want to forget the whole thing ever happened. But I can't. Because every time I close my eyes, I see that dark vortex, and I hear Liam's voice whispering, "Come with me. Let me show you what's beyond." It is a reminder of how vulnerable we are to the digital world and what that can bring. I never used Hinge again. So listen, I need to tell someone about this. I haven't really talked about it to anyone, not even my closest friends, because honestly, it sounds insane when I say it out loud. It all started, predictably, on Hinge. I was fresh out of a pretty brutal breakup, feeling that mix of loneliness and the desperate need to prove to myself that I was still, desirable. Hinge seemed like the least scary option compared to the other dating apps. More relationship-oriented. Or so they claimed. I went through the usual motions, curated photos, witty prompts, the whole shebang. Swiping became a mindless activity, a way to kill time while simultaneously searching for some semblance of connection. And then I matched with him. Liam. His profile was different. Not in a bad way, just unusual. His photos weren't the typical shirtless gym selfies or travel pics. They were more candid, almost melancholic. One was a blurry shot of him, staring out a rain-streaked window. Another was a close-up of his hands, holding a worn-out copy of some obscure Russian novel. His prompts were equally introspective, bordering on cryptic. One said, "I'm convinced everyone is living a secret life. Tell me yours." Another was simply, "What keeps you up at night?" I was intrigued. I messaged him something generic, probably about his favorite Russian author, and to my surprise, he responded almost immediately. Our conversations were unlike anything I'd experienced on a dating app before. He didn't ask about my job or my hobbies. He wanted to know my deepest fears, my hidden dreams, the moments in my life that had shaped me. It was intense, almost unnervingly so. but I was drawn to it. I felt like he was actually seeing me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. After a week of intense messaging, he asked me out. He suggested a small, independent bookstore cafe downtown, somewhere I'd never been. It seemed fitting, given our shared love for literature and all things obscure. I agreed. The night of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, what to say, how to act. I wanted to make a good impression, but more than that, I wanted to be myself. I wanted him to see the real me, the one I'd been hiding for so long. When I arrived at the cafe, Liam was already there, sitting at a corner table, a book in his hands. He looked exactly like his photos, tall, slender, with dark, intense eyes that seemed to pierce right through me. He had this almost unsettling aura about him. His presence was magnetic, but it was almost alarming. He had a gentle smile and stood to give me a hug. The date started off well. We talked for hours about books, music, and life. He was intelligent, articulate, and surprisingly funny. He listened intently to everything I said, making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. I was starting to relax, starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone special. But then things started to get weird. He started asking me about my past, about my childhood, about my relationships. The questions were probing, almost invasive. He wanted to know about my deepest insecurities, my darkest secrets. I tried to deflect, to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he was persistent. It seemed he was determined to learn everything about me, no matter how painful or uncomfortable. He wanted to know things I had never said aloud. Then he started talking about himself, but not in a way that felt natural. He told me about his family, who he claimed were all dead. He told me about his work, which he described as research, but refused to elaborate on. He told me about his dreams, which were filled with cryptic symbols and shadowy figures. It was like he was trying to unburden himself, to confess something terrible, but he couldn't quite bring himself to do it. He kept looking around the room, almost paranoid, like he was expecting someone to appear at any moment. He said, "This place is nice. I wonder if it's ever going to shut down." As the night wore on, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He started fidgeting, pacing, muttering to himself. He kept glancing at his watch, as if he was waiting for something to happen. His eyes darted around the cafe constantly, never settling on one thing for more than a second. Then, he excused himself to go to the bathroom. He was in there for a very long time, so I went to check. The bathroom was empty. I went back to the table, unsure what to do. After about 20 minutes, I decided to leave. I was shaken, disoriented, and eager to get home. When I walked outside, Liam was standing across the street, staring at me. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, his eyes fixed on me. He looked angry, almost hateful. I quickly got into my car and drove away, glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds. He was still standing there, watching me. The next day, I blocked him on Hinge and tried to forget about the whole thing. I chalked it up to a bad date, a weird encounter with a potentially unstable individual. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that I had stumbled into something much bigger and much stranger than I could comprehend. I felt hunted. That night, I started receiving anonymous messages on my phone. They were short, cryptic, and unsettling. Things like, "I know your secrets, and you can't hide from me, and I'm watching you." I changed my number, but the messages continued. They were coming from different numbers each time, making them impossible to trace. It was like someone was playing a game with me, a twisted game of cat and mouse. I went to the police, but they couldn't do anything without more evidence. They suggested I get a restraining order, but I didn't even know Liam's last name or address. I started to fear going out in public. I felt like I was being watched everywhere I went. I saw shadows moving in the corners of my eyes, heard whispers when I was alone. I was slowly losing my mind. Then, one night, I woke up to find someone standing in my bedroom. It was Liam. He was standing in the shadows, his face obscured, but I knew it was him. "I told you. You can't hide from me," he whispered. I screamed and lunged for my phone, but he grabbed me before I could reach it. He didn't hurt me, didn't threaten me, just held me tightly, his grip surprisingly strong. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice soft, almost pleading. "I need you to understand." I was terrified, but I also felt a strange sense of curiosity. I wanted to know what he wanted, what he was hiding, what was driving him to act this way. I pulled away from him and stared into his eyes. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "I need your help. I'm in danger. They're after me." "Who's after you?" I asked. "They're everywhere," he said, his eyes darting around the room. "They're watching us right now." He then looked outside the window, and he started fidgeting. He then quickly sprinted out the door, and I never saw him again. I'm still not sure who or what they are. For months, I moved around. I changed my number again. I eventually moved states, and I haven't received a message ever since. I still fear that maybe he will come find me. I've been trying to forget it, bury it, pretend it didn't happen, but it keeps creeping back into my thoughts. It's a Hinge story, and it's probably the reason I haven't touched a dating app since. I still can't believe it actually happened, like I must have imagined it. I was fresh out of a really bad breakup, you know, the kind where you question everything about yourself. My friends kept telling me to get back out there, that I deserved to be happy. So reluctantly, I downloaded Hinge. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just maybe a distraction, someone to have a few laughs with. My profile was pretty basic. A couple of selfies, a picture with my dog, and some prompts about my favorite travel destinations and guilty pleasures. I swiped around for a while, matched with a few guys, but nothing really clicked. Then I came across Daniel. He was different. In a good way, I thought at the time. His profile was thoughtful and witty. He had pictures of him hiking, volunteering at an animal shelter, and playing the guitar. He seemed genuinely kind and interesting. His prompts were about the books he was reading, his passion for environmental conservation, and his love for obscure indie films. He even had the deal breaker prompt filled out with rudeness. Seemed like a safe bet. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation flowed easily. We talked about our shared love for hiking, our favorite authors, and our dreams for the future. He was a good listener, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated for a moment. I was still feeling a little vulnerable after my breakup, but Daniel seemed so genuine and harmless. I decided to take a chance. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop near my apartment. The day of the date, I was actually excited. I picked out a cute outfit, did my hair, and put on some makeup. I wanted to make a good impression. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Daniel was already there, waiting at a table. He looked even better in person than in his pictures. He stood up to greet me, and we exchanged a warm hug. The first hour of the date was amazing. We laughed, we talked, we shared stories. He was charming, intelligent, and funny. I felt like I could be myself around him. He asked about my job, my family, and my hobbies. He listened attentively and responded with genuine interest. I started to think that maybe, just maybe, this could be something special. But then things started to get weird. It started subtly. He began asking me questions that felt a little too personal, a little too soon. He asked about my past relationships, my deepest fears, and my biggest insecurities. I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was probing, trying to dig deeper than he should. Then, he started making comments about my appearance that made me uncomfortable. He complimented my eyes, my smile, and my hair, but then he would add little remarks about how I could be even prettier if I lost a few pounds or wore different clothes. I started to feel self-conscious and uneasy. The conversation took a darker turn when he started talking about his ex-girlfriend. He described her as crazy and manipulative and said that she had ruined his life. He went on and on about how she had cheated on him, lied to him, and abused him emotionally. I tried to offer him some sympathy, but he seemed to be enjoying the drama, almost reveling in his victimhood. As the date progressed, Daniel became increasingly intense. He started talking about how he had been searching for the one his whole life and how he thought I might be her. He said that he felt a deep connection with me and that he knew we were meant to be together. I was starting to freak out. It had only been a few hours, and he was already talking about soulmates and destiny. I knew I had to get out of there. I made an excuse about having to meet a friend and said that I had to leave. Daniel seemed disappointed but reluctantly agreed to let me go. He walked me to my car and gave me a long, lingering hug. As he hugged me, he whispered in my ear, "I'll be seeing you again soon." I shivered and quickly got into my car. I drove home as fast as I could, feeling a mix of relief and unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just dodged a bullet. The next day, I received a text message from Daniel. He said that he had had a wonderful time on our date and that he couldn't wait to see me again. I ignored the message. A few hours later, I received another text message. This time, he asked me why I was ignoring him. I still didn't respond. The messages kept coming, one after another, each more insistent and desperate than the last. He started calling me, too, but I refused to answer. I blocked his number, hoping that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. He started creating new phone numbers and messaging me from those. He even started emailing me. His messages ranged from love letters to angry accusations. He said that I was breaking his heart, that I was leading him on, and that I was going to regret ignoring him. I was terrified. I felt like I was being stalked. I changed my email address, hoping that would stop him. But it didn't. He somehow found my new email address and started sending me messages there. He even started sending me letters in mail. He knew where I lived. The letters were filled with disturbing and threatening messages. He said that he was watching me, that he knew my routine, and that he would do anything to be with me. I was living in constant fear. I didn't know what to do. I considered going to the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that he was threatening me. It was all just words on paper and in text messages. I was afraid that they wouldn't take me seriously. I started taking extra precautions to protect myself. I installed security cameras in my apartment. I changed my locks, and I started carrying pepper spray. I avoided going out alone, and I always made sure to tell someone where I was going and when I would be back. One night, I was coming home from work when I noticed a figure standing across the street from my apartment building. It was Daniel. He was staring directly at me, with a blank expression on his face. I froze, paralyzed with fear. He started walking towards me, slowly and deliberately. I panicked and ran inside my apartment building, slamming the door behind me. I locked all the doors and windows and hid in my bedroom, shaking with terror. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, watching the security cameras, waiting for him to make a move. But he didn't. The next morning, I went to the police station and filed a report. I showed them the text messages, the emails, and the letters. I told them about Daniel and how he had been stalking me. They finally took me seriously. They assigned a detective to my case and started investigating Daniel. A few days later, the police arrested Daniel. They found evidence that he had been planning to harm me. He had been tracking my movements, researching my background, and even purchasing a weapon. I was relieved and grateful that he had been caught before he could do anything to me. Daniel was charged with stalking and harassment. He was eventually convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought I could finally move on with my life. But I was wrong. Even after he was in prison, Daniel continued to haunt me. He would send me letters from prison, professing his love and apologizing for his behavior. I ignored the letters, but they still managed to creep me out. I knew that he was still obsessed with me, even from behind bars. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and started a new life. I wanted to put as much distance between myself and Daniel as possible. I haven't heard from him since, but I still live in fear that he will one day be released from prison and come looking for me. This whole experience has changed me. I'm more cautious, more guarded, and less trusting of people. I'll never use a dating app again. I'm afraid of what I might find. I still can't believe it actually happened. Sometimes I wonder if it was all just a bad dream. But then I remember the text messages, the letters, and the look on Daniel's face, and I know that it was all real. It's a reminder that you never really know who is on the other end of the screen. You can think you're talking to someone sweet and kind, but behind that profile might be someone else entirely. And it's really scary. It makes you realize the importance of protecting yourself. Don't give out too much information. Meet in a very public place. Let your friends know where you are. I thought I was doing all of those things, but it's clear I wasn't careful enough. It started like any other conversation on Hinge. Your travel photos are amazing. Where was that beach? Standard opener, harmless enough. His name was Daniel, and his profile was curated. Not overly styled, but definitely deliberate. He had a good smile, intelligent eyes, and a bio that mentioned his love for hiking and obscure documentaries. Basically, everything I look for in a potential match. I was cautiously optimistic. I'd been on Hinge for a while, enduring the usual parade of bland profiles and even blander conversations. So when Daniel actually engaged, asking insightful questions, and sharing interesting anecdotes. I was hooked. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our biggest fears. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, which was a refreshing change. We both had similar aspirations, and it felt like we were on the same page, ready for something more than just casual dating. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. He suggested a small cafe in my neighborhood, which I appreciated. It showed he was paying attention to my profile, where I mentioned my love for local spots. The coffee date went perfectly. He was even more charming in person, and we spent hours talking, laughing, and discovering even more common interests. There was a definite spark, a connection that I hadn't felt in a long time. We ended the date with a hug and a promise to see each other again soon. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates. We went to museums, explored hidden parks, and cooked dinner at each other's apartments. He was thoughtful, attentive, and always made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. He sent me sweet texts in the morning, surprised me with flowers, and always remembered the little details I told him about myself. I was falling hard, and I wasn't afraid to admit it. He started talking about the future, about trips we could take together and things we could do as a couple. He mentioned introducing me to his family and friends, and even joked about getting a dog together someday. It all felt so right, so natural. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me, someone who shared my values and dreams. Then, the little things started happening. Nothing major, but enough to make me pause. He would sometimes get distracted mid-conversation, his eyes glazing over as if he were lost in thought. He would occasionally forget details I had told him about myself, things I knew he wouldn't normally forget. And there were the silences, long stretches, where he would just stare into space, a blank expression on his face. At first, I brushed it off as stress or fatigue. Everyone has their off days, right? But the incidents became more frequent, more noticeable. One night, we were having dinner at my place when he suddenly stopped talking and stared at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. His eyes were wide, almost manic, and his breathing was shallow. "Are you okay?" I asked, reaching out to touch his hand. He flinched away from my touch, as if he'd been burned. "Don't touch me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "You don't understand." I was taken aback. "What don't I understand?" He shook his head, his eyes darting around the room as if he were searching for something. "It's not safe," he muttered. "They're watching." "Who's watching, Daniel? What are you talking about?" He stood up abruptly, knocking over his chair. "I have to go," he said, his voice filled with panic. "I can't be here." He rushed out of my apartment, leaving me standing there in shock and confusion. I tried calling him the next day, but he didn't answer. I sent him texts, but he didn't respond. I was worried, but also starting to feel a sense of unease. Was he okay? Or was something else going on? After a few days of silence, I decided to go to his apartment. I had the address from when I drove him home one night after he had too much to drink. When I arrived, the building looked deserted. The paint was peeling, the windows were boarded up, and there was an eerie silence that hung in the air. I checked the address, making sure I had the right place. I did, but something felt wrong. I hesitantly approached the door and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and dusty, as if no one had lived there in years. There was no furniture, no personal belongings, just empty rooms filled with cobwebs and shadows. It was nothing like the cozy, inviting apartment I had visited just a few weeks before. I walked through each room, my heart pounding in my chest. Where was Daniel? What was going on? In the bedroom, I found a small box hidden under the floorboards. I opened it, and inside, I found a stack of old photographs. They were pictures of Daniel, but he looked different, younger, more innocent. And in each photo, he was with a different woman. Women who looked eerily similar to me. Women with the same hair color, the same eye shape, the same smile. A chill ran down my spine. I flipped through the photos, noticing something else. Each woman was crossed out with a red marker. A sense of dread washed over me. I had to get out of there. As I turned to leave, I noticed something on the wall. Scrawled in what looked like blood were the words, "You're next." I screamed and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Who was Daniel? What was he doing? And why were those women crossed out in the photos? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. I decided to do some research. I started by searching Daniel's name online. Nothing. No social media profiles. No employment history. No anything. It was as if he didn't exist. Then, I remembered something he had told me about his family. He had mentioned that his parents lived in a small town a few hours away. I decided to drive there, hoping to find some answers. When I arrived in the town, I went to the local library and started searching the archives. I found a newspaper article about a series of disappearances that had occurred in the town several years ago. Young women, all with similar descriptions, had vanished without a trace. And the prime suspect in the case was a young man named David Miller. A cold shiver ran down my spine. David Miller. Daniel. Was it possible? I continued searching and found a more recent article about David Miller's release from a mental institution. He had been diagnosed with a severe personality disorder and had spent years in treatment. But now he was free. I drove to the address listed for David Miller's parents. The house was small and run down, with a neglected lawn and peeling paint. I hesitantly knocked on the door. An elderly woman answered, her eyes filled with sadness. I introduced myself and asked if she knew Daniel. Her face paled. "Daniel," she whispered. "He hasn't gone by that name in years." I explained what had happened, showing her the photos I had found in the apartment. Her eyes filled with tears. "That's my son, David," she said. "He's sick. He's been hurting people for years. I tried to stop him, but I couldn't." She told me that David had always been a troubled child. He had a fascination with women who looked a certain way, and he would become obsessed with them, showering them with attention and affection. But when they inevitably rejected him, he would turn violent. She told me about the women who had disappeared, the women in the newspaper articles. She said that David had always denied any involvement, but she knew in her heart that he was responsible. "He's dangerous," she said. "You need to stay away from him. He'll hurt you." I thanked her for her honesty and left the house, my mind reeling. Everything was starting to make sense. Daniel was David, a disturbed and dangerous man who had been preying on women for years. He had found me on Hinge, drawn to my appearance, and had manipulated me into falling for him. And now I was in danger. I went to the police and told them everything. They took my statement and launched an investigation. They found David's apartment and the evidence I had described. But David was gone. He had disappeared without a trace. I lived in fear for months, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering if he was watching me. I changed my name, moved to a new city, and deleted all my social media profiles. I tried to move on with my life, but the experience had left me scarred. I'll never trust anyone I meet online again. The image of those women with the red X's over their faces haunts my dreams. It started like any other conversation on Hinge, but it ended in a nightmare that I'll never forget. It taught me a harsh lesson about the dangers of online dating and the importance of trusting my instincts.